Hi, I'm Helen Lee, lecturer in the Oral Communication program. Whether you're preparing a synchronous or asynchronous presentation, scripting out your ideas ensures that they are clearly developed and articulated. When it comes to presentation time, however, some of you may feel more comfortable using your keyword notes. Others may prefer to use their script. For asynchronous presentations in particular, sticking with the script isn't a bad idea because it helps us to communicate our ideas very concisely, making every second of our vocal remarks count. This is important today when people don't have a lot of time and they want to consume content efficiently. That being said, delivering with a script takes some skill and practice to do well. We generally want to aim for a more conversational and elevated conversational delivery. This is much easier to listen to. It feels like there's more psychological immediacy for the audience to the speaker when we do this. But how to do that when we're using a script? In this video, I'll outline some things that you can do when you're working with your script so that it doesn't sound as much like you're reading and more like you're speaking directly to your remote audience. We're going to be looking and working with this excerpt of a script that I adapted from the work of Samuel Ramsey, who did some research on honeybees and a parasite that's attacking the honeybees. One of the first questions we would want to ask when working with our script is whether there's a need to adapt the script for the oral mode. When we write our manuscript for an oral presentation, it's not uncommon for our writing style for academic papers that are read to seep into what we're writing for an oral presentation. But the two are not necessarily the same. Notice then the length of your sentences. Typically for written articles, they tend to be longer, the structure is more complex. Because the reader has all the time in the world to read that paper, pause when they want to, reread things. But this is not really helpful for a listener who's processing the material in the moment as they listen to your voice. So that's something to be thinking about, as well as your word choice. Are you using the terminology or the vocabulary that you would use when you're speaking to a colleague or a classmate? So those are some things to notice. Let's take a closer look at this first line. The prevailing and accepted view has been that Varroa destructor mites consume hemolymph. So not too bad, but it does still sound a bit formal. And there's like a special term here, hemolymph, which, I mean, maybe if you're trying to pitch this to a broader or mixed audience, that might not be as accessible. This line could be revised to, the accepted view has been that Varroa feed on blood. Okay, much more straightforward and to the point, and it communicates basically the same thing. But this particular speaker took it a step further and added some style. Now the sentence reads, it's been accepted as if axiomatic that Varroa feed on blood. Isn't that nice? Did you hear the rhythm and the syncopation in that sentence? That's created by this, the assonance in accepted and axiomatic. I think that's pretty cool. So something to think about. Can you even add some layers of style to your language choice? Now, just to continue, let's look at the second sentence. I challenge you to read this all on one breath. I'm going to have a go at it. However, a review of the research revealed that this view is based on work conducted in the 1970s that used methods that have since fallen out of favor and ultimately failed to accurately identify the target host tissue. When you're reading your script out loud, do you notice that you're panting? Can you even get through the sentence without having to take multiple breaths? If you can't, this is a very clear sign that you need to adapt your script for the oral mode. Consider breaking up those longer sentences into shorter sentences. When Samuel did this, this is what he came up with. Notice how all of a sudden 2 or 3 lines are gone. It now reads, but while looking through the body of research, I found that we've been citing a study for nearly half a century that never actually proved that. Okay, wonderful, beautiful. It communicates the exact same idea, no loss there in meaning, and yet it's just much more concise and much more conversational. Okay, so next, let's format the script. So I've enlarged the font here now that we're comfortable with the wording. When you print out your script, consider using double space as opposed to single space and enlarging the font size to at least 14. This will make it much easier for you to read and not lose your place. If you have tiny font, that becomes much more challenging. So format your script so that it's easy to see. And then next, you're going to mark up your script. And by that, I mean, how about underlining words that you might want to emphasize, or using backslashes to remind yourself to pause or take a breath. You can also put in notes to remind yourself of where to get louder or what lines to deliver more softly, etc. You can also mark up in the margins reminders to yourself to look at the camera, for instance, any kind of notes to self that will help cue you to remember things that you're likely to forget when you're in the middle of a presentation. Then next, you're ready to practice. Practice, practice, practice. This will help develop muscle memory. Delivering a talk involves speech muscles being coordinated with your brain. So the practice really helps with that. Also, practicing with colleagues, with peers is really helpful just to get some feedback and suggestions on how to improve your delivery or how to clarify the content. Through practice, you also start to internalize the flow of your presentation. This will enable you to look up more often to your audience when you're delivering the talk. And just remember to, even though you have the script in front of you, you want to stay actively thinking about what you're reading. You never want to mentally disconnect to the text on the page and just simply mechanically speak it, because there's something about your mental focus and motivation to communicate what's on the page that gives that energy that really does transfer to the audience. And don't be afraid to let go of the script at times. This is appropriate in longer, lengthier presentations. When you have certain moments where you can just speak more extemporaneously, you're so familiar with your script, you know exactly what you want to say, so you can talk about that point, maybe share that story, just using the words that come to you in the moment instead of having to use the verbatim text that you had prepared. If you can add in a few moments of this throughout your longer presentation, it will add just another layer of spontaneity and conversational quality that will be very engaging for your audience. Let's take a look now at how the speaker ended up delivering his presentation. This was Samuel Ramsey's 3-minute thesis. I'm just showing you a 30-second portion of it. Being a relatively short speech, I believe that Samuel ended up memorizing his script or perhaps using a teleprompter. Nevertheless, I hope you'll notice and appreciate the vocal variety, the places where he incorporated breaths and emphasis, and notice also his facial expressions and gestures as a bonus.
It's been accepted as if axiomatic that varroa feed on the bee's blood, but while looking through the body of research, I found that we've been citing a study for nearly half a century that never actually proved that. Enter my project. The goal was to figure out what varroa is eating. I started with the question, where do they feed? If they can feed anywhere on a bee, the way that a tick can on you, then they're probably feeding on blood. However, if they feed only in one spot, maybe they're eating a tissue specific to that location. The results? They fit only in one spot.
Excellent. Let's wrap it up now with a brief recap. If you are planning to use a manuscript to deliver your next digital presentation, aim for an elevated conversational style. Adapt your script for the oral mode as necessary. Format your script, bigger fonts, more spacing so that it's easy to read. Mark up your script and practice, practice, practice until all those planned vocal emphases are internalized and you're so familiar with the flow of your talk. If you'd like help with preparing your next presentation, remember our oral communication tutors are wonderful and they're available to assist you virtually in spring quarter. Please contact speakinghelp.stanford.edu if you have any questions about the content, are interested in meeting with a tutor, or have any other questions about our services.